First introductions I had to contextualized worship was about, maybe it's about 9 years ago, maybe 7 or 8 years ago. It was. I was living back in Gallup, New Mexico, and I was involved in a church there, actually at Rehoboth Church, just right outside of Gallup, New Mexico. And I was they have a lay term called a licensed exhorter, which means you're basically approved and allowed to preach in the churches in the surrounding area. And so I was out exhorting in these churches around the reservation, maybe 2 or 3 times a month, teaching in the different churches. And one time I was out in one of the churches near Crown Point, and I was preaching there, and there was some members of a congregation from a Navajo church in Denver who were down, and they heard me preach, and their pastor had just left. And they came up to me and said, "We're a small church, we need a bivocational pastor. Are you at all interested in coming to work with us?" And I said, "Sure, well, let me pray about it." So I took some time, and it was one of those prayers where you're asking God, but you kind of, it's like, "Mom, do I need to eat my vegetables?" You kind of know what the answer is going to be. And so I'm like, "God, should I go pastor this church?" Okay, I'll go. And so we had some commitments. We had to finish up in Gallup, and so we stayed there for a few more months, and then we moved up to Denver. And the first board meeting that I was in for the council of this church, it was a small church, they said, "Our last pastor introduced us to the concept of contextualized worship. And we were fascinated by it, and we would love for you to lead us into that." And I thought, that sounds wonderful. What is it? I had never heard of that concept before. And they said, "Well, there's this conference in Hawaii that we want to send you to. It's 2 weeks, and you'll have to be there with your family." And I'm like, "Sure." So we went off to Hawaii, and this conference was for a group called the World Christian Gathering of Indigenous Peoples. And it's indigenous Christians from all over the world who come together every 2 or 3 years to basically share stories, encourage one another, and talk about the things they are doing among their own people to contextualize the gospel for their people. And one of the things that really took me by surprise was the way this group did worship. I was used to large Christian conferences. I was used to diverse congregations. I was used to multi-ethnic worship. But I had never seen anything like this before. Because they didn't have the multi-ethnic praise band up front who kind of, sang hymns familiar to everyone and then threw in a Spanish song every now and then, or had a different drum set going or something like that. But every night they actually gave the stage to a different tribe. And that night, that tribe, for half hour, whatever they needed, they led worship. And it was a little disconcerting to me because one of the first tribes that was given, this group, the World Christian Gathering of Indigenous Peoples, was founded by a Maori. One of the founders was a Maori Christian leader from New Zealand. And the Maori have a tradition called a haka. Has anyone ever heard of a haka? A haka is a loud demonstration of power. So when the Maori army is going off to battle, they send their warriors ahead of them. And they go in front of the opposing army, and they basically do a display of power. Kind of what we do a lot with our army around the world. You send your warriors, and they do this powerful display of their might in front of the opposing army, just to let them know they're not afraid, and if you want to turn back now, you can. And this Maori leader was watching this one day and thinking about it, and he said, "That looks very similar to putting on the armor of God." He said, "The missionary said I couldn't use my culture in my worship. Why can't I do a haka that represents taking up the sword of truth, or the breastplate of righteousness, or any of the other armor that Paul talks about in his passage on that?" And so he did that. And so to start their worship, they came up, and these very large men with very little clothing on came up and they did a haka. Now a haka is not like, rah, 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 go team go. They're standing there with their loincloths on and very little else. They have these spears and these swords in their hand, and they're going, ha, ha, yeah, ha, ha, yeah, ha, and they're just screaming at the top of their lungs. And I've never worshipped that way before. And I'm sitting in the back of this auditorium, and I was like, what is going on, Naked worship leaders is a surreal experience. I mean, I know David did it, but it's not common. And they did this presentation. And then they asked anyone in the audience, if you want to come up and join us and learn how to do this, please come forward. And I didn't go forward. I'm not quite there yet, guys. I'm gonna sit this one out. And the next night, the Native Hawaiians came forward. If you've ever been to Hawaii, the story of the islands is absolutely amazing. It's one of the purest places you can find. And the story of how even the vegetation and the animal life and all that came to these islands that were just volcanic islands that came up out of the water. It's just incredibly amazing. And it's so beautiful. And the people there, we've all heard the word aloha. But aloha is not just a greeting. It's a whole way of life. It's an incredibly deep and meaningful word, and you live aloha. And we were experiencing this conference was hosted by the Native Hawaiian people, and we were experiencing the aloha of their welcoming and of their life, and as they greeted us and welcomed us to their island and hosted us there very, very generously. And as we saw the beauty of their islands and the aloha of the people, one of their young ladies, or a few of the young ladies, came forward one night, and they said, "We've taken a hula. And we've written a hula to God." And they came forward and they did this very beautiful dance that if I had been watching it on Discovery Channel would have absolutely amazed me. But again, I'm used to certain things in church and at conferences, and hula isn't one of them. And I'm sitting in the back and I'm kind of observing again. And again, they finished their hula, and they said, who would like to come up and join us and learn how to do the hula with us to God? And again, I politely passed. And each night, it was this type of thing. A different tribe, a different group, coming forward and leading worship in a different language, in a different style, in a different context. Everything was new and different. And it very much kind of freaked me out and made me feel very uncomfortable. But the longer I sat there, and day after day of experiencing this and being in discussion with these people and getting to know them and understand some of their stories, the more I began to realize what God was doing. When the Maori people did their haka, I realized and I saw and I experienced these people understand God as a warrior better than anyone I've ever met. They understand that truth about God's character better than most people, most tribes, most groups I've ever met. The Native Hawaiians understand the beauty and the grace of God better than most people I've ever met. The Native Americans who came forward with their drums and with their flutes and with all of the music that they came and it was like you could hear the buffalo running by, or you could hear the birds and the leaves floating past. And you heard them talk about the Creator, and you saw the relationship they were trying to reestablish with the creation that God had given us. And realized these people understand God as our Creator better than most people I've ever met. And I realized one of the reasons I was feeling so awkward as I sat in the back of that room and observed this is because every night God was getting bigger and bigger and bigger.